So many people moved here because they loved the sense of place. Many people felt that Pasadena, the city, reminded them of their cities in the Middle West, small towns that they had grown up in. They loved all the trees, so many people came. And then they began to feel this pressure of seeing more and more plans that would call for the demolition of large portions of the downtown. And so we did find ourselves with allies, and they came mostly from the neighborhood associations. And at the library then working was John Merritt, who was an activist working for the city of Pasadena. And he had a history background, and he was very instrumental in sort of bringing a lot of us together, working together to understand more about the architecture and the importance of preserving it as well. But there were also other issues that were on the table. There were upzonings that were going on that made neighborhoods concerned. And in addition, there were plans for the Civic Center, which would have been extremely damaging. At one point, there was discussion of taking down both the YW and the YMCA and rebuilding those sites with two 10-story buildings. That was not well received by the community.
Well, and I would add that Pasadena, despite its agenda to remake itself as a corporate headquarters, had, with the leadership of Dr. Robert Winter and newspaper columnist Miv Schaff and others, created some time before, I can't remember exactly how long, a cultural heritage ordinance for the city of Pasadena, but it was relatively modest or weak, but it did exist. And there was city staff assigned to work on historic surveys and to begin to collect information. And there was a commission assigned to look at landmark nominations. So there was at the city at least the kernels of a preservation sensitivity, but I think we felt it was relegated to a fairly limited role. And the leaders of that cause were enthusiastic and knowledgeable, but what was really needed was a sort of groundswell of support for that program. So within the city, we had allies, but they weren't strong, and the program was fairly minimal in the mid-'70s.
Well, Sue mentioned the survey effort, architectural and historic survey of the historic neighborhoods of Pasadena, or historic districts perhaps, to embrace more than just the residential neighborhoods. And that was a kind of launching pad for some of us to become more focused on historic preservation and engaged in activities that ultimately led to the formation of Pasadena Heritage. Many of the early Pasadena Heritage volunteers came out of that other volunteer effort to go forward. We were known as the streetwalkers, humorously or pejoratively, depending on one's point of view, going out and neighborhoods and standing in front of historic buildings for a long time, making people wonder what was going on. So that has been an ongoing effort in the city of Pasadena until now, more than 3 decades later, with the original hope and expectation that the entire city would be surveyed for its historic resources.
I think another group too that was involved in a lesser role was the Junior League, and there were several of us who were active in the Junior League who were very supportive of starting a private organization of, such as Pasadena Heritage, and worked in those early days with that goal. And I would add that it was really Miv Schaff, who was the columnist for the Los Angeles Times and was on the Cultural Heritage Commission with Bob Winter, who called a group of us together one day around her dining room table and said, the Cultural Heritage Commission can only do so much because the ordinance is weak. So you just must form an organization that can work in the community and will be separate from us and can do the things that we can't do. And so that was really sort of the very beginning discussions about forming an organization, a nonprofit, Pasadena Heritage.
One of the activities that I first got involved in when I returned to Pasadena in 1974 was participating in the planning effort for the California Design 1910 exhibit, which was a very significant event in the rediscovery, as it were, of the American arts and crafts movement. Pasadena, of course, being one of the centers, but not having been fully recognized or appreciated by then. This was the second major exhibit in the United States, following one back east in 1972, focusing on the American arts and crafts. And Pasadena is particularly rich in the results of that movement here in Southern California. And it was actually through my involvement in planning for that exhibit that I got to know a number of other people who were similarly minded and remain close friends even till now. Some of those people did become part of the original formation of Pasadena Heritage.
I think it's also important to note that there was a historical society, now the Pasadena Museum of History, that existed here and had a long history, but it was not an advocacy organization. It was a collector of photographs and memorabilia and had a different mission. And I would also say I remember clearly that although we had a couple of very devoted realtors who helped us and worked hard in those early days, in general, the real estate community was not particularly supportive of this interest in preservation.